system in place to keep us in chains. By show of hands, who else is sick and tired of the same 1%? Trying to keep us small, trying to keep us from getting out. Minimizing the struggles they've caused, saying we're not working hard enough.
We really should stop this fighting. Otherwise, we'll miss the fireworks.
There won't be any fireworks.
And here we go.
And welcome, everybody, to Suck It. I am the great and powerful King of Kings, Prince of all that is awesome, Derek. How the fuck are you doing today on this Friday, January 29th of the year that is 2021? Whew, the week is over. The week is over. Thank God it's Friday. I enjoy my Fridays because now I get to look forward to the weekend of more work. Because it never stops on this show, unfortunately. Record 10 episodes a week and book on the weekends and every other day and drive myself batshit insane. And while I'm driving myself insane, I come on the show and talk about how to relieve mental health. But yet, I drive myself crazy with doing the stuff that I do. Isn't that just fun? That's exactly what we do here, is have fun. And continuing on with our theme of this week of mind, body, and soul, getting back into, again, that groove of focusing more on mental health than I had been in the past, and focusing more on just, you know, the other issues that I do talk about on the show. Because, again, for 4 months, I talked to nothing but bands and, you know, actors and comedians. Didn't talk to any real, you know, survivors or, you know, anybody that really had any influence or experience with the whole mental health stuff. And it kind of lost sight. So this week was all about reintroducing that and bringing it back. And I told you going forward, it's going to be more diverse to where it's going to have a little bit of everything on a weekly basis, not just one style or one type, and try to keep it changing and going on a weekly basis. And that doesn't change again for tonight, because tonight I have an author on the show that wrote a book called What to Expect When You're Having Expectations. A book about just expectations and getting upset when you don't have your needs met. Very interesting read, very interesting person, and we're going to have a lot of fun and a lot of talk about this subject and more with our guest tonight, Mr. Ben Winter. Hey, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for reaching out. I always love to talk to, interesting and, different types of guests, and you definitely fit that bill. So,
I'm glad I can.
Hey, no problem. So, why don't you tell everybody who you are, what you do, and what the idea behind the book was?
Yeah, so as you've said, Ben Winter, and I own a company called Success Improv where I teach team building using the tools and techniques of improv. And throughout that process, I've kind of learned that through one of the rules of improv, there's this thing called expectations that we have. And it was kind of an interesting find in that when I was working through it, I realized that nobody gets upset unless an expectation hadn't been met. And so I was like, that's a really cool saying, but what the hell do I do with it? And that's when I kind of came up with this kind of cool flow chart that's in the book, and kind of working through that upset moment. And then I was like, well, if I've got the quote, the flow chart, I may as well write a book. So the book came out after all the other stuff was put in place.
So you're in a roundabout way, you're kind of like a life coach type person.
Kind of. I have been asked in the past, like, hey, do you do personal one-on-one coaching? The answer is yes. However, most people don't want to pay the price that I charge. So, it is what it is. But most of the time I'm doing group team building training for companies. Obviously not so much during the pandemic.
Yeah, obviously. So what exactly, do companies come to you for, as far as this, is it like a team building thing? I mean, what exactly is the purpose that a company would come to you for?
So a lot of it's team building, because most people associate having fun with team building. And so improv is fun. However, it works for improving the company culture. It improves sales. the reality is we improvise every moment of every day of our lives. And what most people don't realize is that if you take an actual stage improv class, the rules that you learn for stage improv apply to life in general. And if everybody in the company is following those same set of rules, everybody just moves better, communicates better, produces more, and everybody's just having more fun. And if I've been in corporate America, and it's definitely more enjoyable to show up if you're having fun. So why not
Ain't that the
make a
truth?
better environment?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is the truth behind it all. I mean, if you're going to work every day and you're just unhappy, I mean, you're at a job, you're not at a career, and you've got to make sure that you're having fun with it. I mean, especially in corporate America. I mean, because God, I mean, I'm so glad I don't have to worry about corporate America anymore. Well, I kind of do, but in a roundabout way. But because I got to deal with sponsors and regulations and shit like that, but I don't have to worry about reporting to a boss anymore, thankfully. But
Exactly.
the the ideas of improv applying to everyday life. Let's talk about that for a second, because that's actually pretty interesting. I've never thought about it like that. Because I mean, I know improv. I've taken improv classes. I've done improv and stuff like that before. But how do those principles apply to everyday life for someone that doesn't know what those principles are?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you ask most people if they know any rules of improv, the first one that's going to come to their mind, if they've heard any at all, is don't deny, or yes and. I'm sorry, yes and is the most common one that people know.
Yeah,
And if you've ever taken an improv class, that's like either number one or number two on the list.
correct.
Um, in my so my first book is Living Unscripted, which pretty much talks about this. But my number one rule is don't deny. But second rule is yes and. So I'm going to stick with yes and for right now to answer your question. So yes and really comes down to accepting what is and adding to it. And in everyday life, sometimes we're like, oh, I don't have money in my bank account. And so now I'm, pissed off. I'm denying it. Like, no, there should be money there. But hey, you spent it on pizza last week, so you don't. Um, and it's just really, okay, I don't have money in my bank account. Now what do I do? Do I go out and get a side hustle? Do I beg on the street? Like, what do I do to put more money in that bank account? And that yes and rule really applies to everyday life, because how many times a day are we like in denial about what's going on, or watching the news and we're in denial? It's just one of those things where you're like, okay, this is what's happening. What can I do about it, or what can I do for myself about it? And a lot of times all we can do is kind of change the way that we react to a situation more than change the situation. Now sometimes we can change a situation by reacting differently to it, but that's where those kind of rules of improv come in. If you see two people walk up on stage and one of them says hi mom, the other one has to accept that they're now mom, and they have to add to the scene, because if they deny that they're mom, everybody's kind of like thrown off. The audience doesn't care about the scene anymore. It doesn't become believable. Whereas when they embrace the mom factor, then it just becomes funny and entertaining. So if life is fun and entertaining, isn't it more fun to live? Just a thought. So
Yeah, that actually does make a whole hell of a lot of sense. Because yeah, the yes and is definitely was the number one lesson that we learned in our class. Um, because because I guess applying that to the real world, could help alleviate a lot of that stress and a lot of those things, and building on that team mentality. I can really see how that works, and that's really interesting. I mean, was that something that you came up with on your own, or was it another ideal that you kind of spun into your own idea?
it was kind of a combination of personal growth, owning a business, and doing improv. And it sort of all came together in 2015 for me. Now, there's other people out there teaching improv and businesses and other stuff like that, and for everyday life. My approach really comes down to, let's teach you in a form of basically learning stage improv, but then also applying it during that training to everyday life. Like one of the rules is focus on the present. Um, and Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, is like an entire book dedicated to just being in the present. And it's magical what happens if you just stay in the moment. Like, as we're doing this interview, if either one of us is thinking about all the stuff we have to do this weekend, we're not going to be present for this conversation. And you might ask something and I'll be like, how many loads of laundry do I have to do? Oh, wait, you asked a question. What? And then it's just not a natural conversation. It's not fun to watch. It's not enjoyable for anyone. And so I have to be focused here and now. You, as the person doing the interview, has to be here and now to, because I might say something where you're like, I want to dive into that.
Yeah.
And focusing on the present is so huge on stage improv, but when you practice it in everyday life, your days are just so much easier, because most of the time that we're freaking out mentally is because we're thinking about something that might happen in the future. Probably won't, but might. And so there's a lot of peace with being in the now, focusing on the present.
So you actually do improv.
Yeah, I've been with a group called the Rodents of Unusual Size for about a decade now. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, we have a lot of fun.
I can imagine. I've never been great at improv. I mean, because I'm a stand-up comic, and sometimes it doesn't always translate. Because I'm constantly thinking about just other types of, as you guys are talking, or as if you're talking right now, the wheels are spinning. It's okay. How can I just take what he just said and turn it into a joke? And it's just a constant joke in my head, and it's like, oh, it's my turn to talk.
Yeah, I mean, my improv class, they were like, if you try to do the one-liner at the end, you're gonna just screw up everybody. So
Exactly.
So yeah, stand-up comedians have a hard time with improv.
Yeah, but there's some that can do it flawlessly.
Oh yeah.
I mean, others that that's not me. I'm too busy thinking about the one-liner.
I like it.
And when I'm doing this, I'm actively listening to find the next topic. Like you said, to dive into something else, or to make a joke to segue into something else. But yeah, the act of listening is key. Not just in interviews and not just at work, but in relationships too. I mean, far too often are we sitting there saying yes, dear, yes, dear, yes, dear, and then she goes. Then 10 minutes later, did you do what I asked? Well, what'd you ask?
When did you ask it?
Yeah. It's like last night, my girlfriend was upstairs cleaning our the kids' bathroom, and she had a wet towel that she threw down, and she goes, "Hey, can you throw this into the washer, or throw this into the basket, that you're getting ready to take down to the washer?" I said, "Sure, no problem." Now I didn't realize it was wet. All I heard was, "Hey, throw that towel in the," so it's just sitting on the towel floor, wet, whatever. And I don't think, I'm going to go down there in like 10 minutes. Let me just finish doing what I'm doing. I'm going to head down. She comes downstairs like 3 minutes later. "Thanks for doing what I asked." It's like, I didn't realize there was more to this conversation. And, that happens again in life. We make that assumptions. We think about something else. We're not focused on the other thing that the other person's talking about. And in improv and in interviewing, talk radio, talk shows, whatever, you have to have that active listening. And that's interesting about applying it to everyday life. Huh.
Yeah. And that's hilarious that you talked about the towel and the girlfriend or the wife asking the partner to do something. Because in the book that I talk specifically like, "Hey, honey, take out the trash." But in this case, it's like, "Hey, throw the towel in the wash." But did she specify why, when, like, "Hey, it's wet. I don't want it sitting on the floor. It needs to happen now." She never specified that. She didn't provide that in detail of information. At the same time, you didn't ask, like, "What's your time frame?" There's a lot of times we assume, and we have expectations of other people to do it based on what's inside our head, even though we didn't communicate it. And so oftentimes we're getting upset at somebody without even telling them our expectation. And like, that's one of those first things is like, did you even communicate? Did you even know you had that expectation? Did you share it with anyone? And so oftentimes it's not even a reasonable thing to be upset, because we didn't even know we had the expectation until it went unmet, and then we never shared it. And so, like, in that scenario, it's kind of silly for her to be upset when she didn't say, like, "I need this in the wash now because it's wet." That would have been like, "Oh yeah, I don't want a wet towel sitting on my floor either, so let me go grab it." Yeah. It's communication.
And I like how you spun that to the topic of the book.
Well, it's actually in both books, so it's just like, hey, it's right there.
Yeah, no, that's actually a good point too. Because we could both be actively listening, we could be both having this amazing conversation, but if we're not setting clear expectations for each other, then it's null and void. It's completely moot.
Sometimes, I mean, it'll create interesting dialogue later.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Similar situation, that happened about a week ago. A shirt was, she said, "Hey, I'm going to order you this shirt. It's really cool." Okay, cool. She never mentioned that she actually did order it, or even tell me what it was. And then it came in the mail, and I'm like, "What is this?" And she goes, "I told you about this last week." I'm like, "You told me, but you didn't tell me you ordered it. You didn't even tell me what it was. I showed you a picture." "No, you didn't." And it's those stupid little things like, yeah, that's damn. That's actually pretty.
They're the most minor things, but they all add up at the end.
No,
So
really, yeah,
it's crazy.
It's amazing how you can apply that to to a lot of different situations. It's just like, damn, that makes a whole hell of a lot of sense.
Yeah,
That's
it's amazing what we'll get upset about when and I would say most of the time, probably 80% of the time, if not more, we didn't even know we had the expectation to begin with. And that's where I kind of thrive in this situation. I'm like, by all means, get upset, but take a moment when you get upset and start thinking about it and just say, like, did I know I had an expectation?
Mhm.
Did I share that expectation? Is it reasonable? Did we have a conversation? Like all those various things that can go on. Because at some point you're going to stop yourself and say, yeah, I was responsible for not communicating or sharing or even knowing that I had it. So
Yeah, because one of the things that I remember quite frequently in the business world, as a store manager for large grocery chains and store manager for the world's largest retailer, you know, um, we would constantly get shit on by our bosses for not doing something, and it was like, well, did you ask me to do that? The expectation's there. But
right.
yeah, but the thing about it is how well did you communicate that expectation? Or you've been doing this long enough, you should know how to do this by now. And it's like, okay, well, their expectation is that you should remember everything at every given moment and never forget shit. So it's like, okay, we're cool. I have no problem with doing that, but can you write it down for me? But it's amazing that kind of stuff still happens. I mean, in reality, we only retain so much information, and especially in the corporate world, the only thing that's consistent is change. And it's that constant change really messes with somebody's psyche, especially if you've been doing it for such a long time, and then all of a sudden you're just expected to know how to make that change like that.
Yeah, without giving any information as to how or what are the new expectations with that change. It's one of the things with rules is that they kind of create this foundation for you to work within. In the corporate world, it's like you need to show up at this time and leave at this time. Okay, I can work with that. I know what the expectation is. It's when you don't know those expectations that you start to ruffle the edges for somebody else, and then they're like, "What the hell are you doing?" And it's like, well, define it for me. Make it easy for me. Communicate your expectations. I'll communicate mine. We'll come to some mutual agreement, and it'll all work out. To your point, write it down for me. If you want me to remember, write it down so I can go back and reference it. It's not that hard.
Yeah. I mean, it's really not. And one of my favorite things is, they'll send out, an email 2 months before it happens or something happens. And like, I told you about this in an email. How long ago? Most retentions and emails for a corporate only has a 30-day, retention policy, and it's deleted. So did you send it to me as a calendar invite or just a, hey, heads up?
Right. And when we set up meetings for people, a lot of people will follow up the 2 days before, 1 day before, to ensure that the person will be there. They'll be on time. And since I have my own business, I always do that. I always follow up with people and say, hey, are we still on for this Thursday? Hey, are we still on tomorrow? Rarely will I be like, hey, it's the morning of, are we still on today? Unless they've been flaky in the past.
Yeah.
but it's setting that expectation of, hey, I'm going to be there, I need you to be there. And it's, you know, I'm one of those types of people where if I put it in my calendar, it's gold, I'm going to be there. And I have that weird expectation that other people do the same thing, which is not always the case. And so I have to always check in with myself. Did I communicate with them and say, hey, it's in my calendar, I'm going to be there, and I'm going to follow up with you and make sure you're going to be there, because I don't want you wasting my time, I don't want to be wasting your time. And so, you know, it's totally reasonable for people to do that. It's communicating, it's setting those boundaries, setting those expectations.
So you said, or at least what I gathered, that the majority of the reason why we get upset in this world is because expectations aren't met. Do you think that applies to every reason we get upset, or is that just the main root of the issue underlying? I mean, what exactly do you mean by that?
I personally believe it comes down to absolutely every reason that we ever get upset. I have not found an example where I haven't been able to prove that. By all means, if somebody has one, shoot it my way. But it's kind of like the two sides of a coin. You think about like the laundry scenario. They're upset because you didn't do it in their time frame, but they didn't even know they had that expectation. Mm-hmm. And all the way to a parent dies and you're upset. Well, you're upset because you wanted your parent to be around longer. You thought you would have more time. You thought you'd be able to share more. You thought you'd be able to see them, for a longer period of time. There's many, many reasons to be upset, but they're all expectation driven. And, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But every example I've ever played with, because I'm writing it down in a book, I want to make sure that I'm correct. So I just started playing with so many examples, and I'm like, yeah, there's an expectation behind it.
I mean, but like, all right. So let me throw one at you that immediately came to my head. Some random guy that you don't even know, you don't know why he's upset. Let's just say, for instance, you cut him off, and you're in a parking lot of Walmart. Okay, you get out of your car and you're thinking nothing's wrong, everything is good to go. He just walks up to you and calls you a dickhead and walks away. Doesn't give you any reason. He just called you a dickhead and walked away. Mm-hmm. You're gonna get upset by that.
Of course.
Where's the expectation standard in that?
Well, the expectation is that people are human and decent. And a lot of it is going to go back to how you were raised. If you were raised to get out of your car, go to the store, do your thing, and go back to your car, then you're not expecting anybody to deviate from that. Now, if you're the guy who grew up getting out of the cars and yelling at people and calling them dicks, then your expectation is anytime somebody cuts you off, you're going to expect them to walk up and call you a dick. But, a lot of it just goes back to how we're raised. So, I was raised, okay, my bad, whatever, let's move on. And so, yeah, I would be upset somebody was calling me a dick, but I also recognize that's something they grew up with. That's something they learned, and they're having either a bad day, something happened for them, and I just kind of let it roll off my shoulders. But yeah, I mean, there's absolutely an expectation of people being good. And when they're not, you're like, well, what the hell?
Yeah.
Why is this guy shitting on me? I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, keep the shitting on people in the bedroom. See, there you go.
right as I'm drinking water. Thanks. There's a lot of expensive equipment here, sir.
That's why I sit away from my computer and have all my stuff over there. So if I spill something, I just ruin my fancy IKEA couch.
There you go.
And my $20 green screen. So I told you, I'm always looking. I'm actively listening. I'm waiting for that opportunity.
It's more fun that way.
Yeah. And you just gave me like the complete perfect R. Kelly setup, and I was very appreciative of that.
You're welcome.
Improv. That makes a lot of sense. I didn't think about it like that. I was more like, I have an expectation of not being a dickhead. You know what I'm saying? I was like, that doesn't even make any sense. So no, the way that expectation of common decency in people, that's an interesting way of spinning it. I didn't think about it like that.
There's this phrase that we all use. It's called common sense. And, more and more, it's just not common for people to have common sense. But there's a different way of looking at it, is that one person's common sense is okay for them and another person's common sense is okay for them. It's just how they learned that particular common sense growing up. You know, what somebody considers common sense, I might think of as like the most idiotic thing I've ever heard. And to them, it makes perfect sense. And so that's kind of the world that we live in, is that we have to accept everybody grows up differently. They grow up in a different uh, culture, different society, different location on the planet. And so they have different experiences growing up. And that's just going to make everything, their expectations about life, the universe, and everything different, just as my experience of the life universe and everything is going to be different. So I can't possibly expect that everybody else thinks the way that I think or acts the way that I act. And so when they deviate from that, it's kind of like there's an acceptance level, and then there's that upset level where it's like, who the hell taught you that that's okay? You know, it's like, you don't get out of a car and call somebody a dickhead. Like, what's wrong with you? And but they could be having the worst day ever. You just never know what's happening in their life and how they grew up. And it just goes back to that saying of you just don't know until you walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. And sometimes I don't want to. So
Yeah. I've been the guy that's been cut off and called somebody a dickhead in the parking lot of a Walmart. It was more about, you know, just me venting my frustration. Yeah, and having to be that passive aggressive sarcastic guy, you know. Damn, who the fuck taught you how to fucking drive?
I say that inside my car all the time.
I say it outside my car, and that's a problem. Yeah, that is not a good expectation to have for life. Do you just be able to spout off at the mouth at any given time, not have a censor button, and really kind of worry about your well-being and your family's well-being at any given moment because you have no filter and you just vomit words as they come to your brain. Which brings me to my next point. And I, you know, because you kind of said it before, you know, what made you come out and say it like that? What made, you know, where do you think you're coming from, or who do you think you are to be able to say those types of things? And in this day and generation, you know, we're seeing, you know, events on a daily basis where that kind of stuff is happening. You know, whether it's your stereotypical Karen or your stereotypical Kyle or Chad, whatever they're calling the guy version of Karens these days are, you know, and people just like me, you know, I do it because I think it's funny, but at the same time, it's just what I do. But these people that are so impassioned that they feel the need to just completely, like, where do you think that has come from? Especially in this day and age of expectations, to where everybody has their expectations set to only meet their needs. And they think they walk into a Walmart or a Target or an Applebee's and think that you know, the way that they do business should cater to every single one of my needs, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And if you don't do that, where's your manager? Give me a haircut, and where's your manager? You know, and that's automatically how it happens. Why do you think that has become, I hate to say this, but commonplace these days?
Well, there's several things there. One is, again, it goes back to how they were raised and how they saw life, or they came up during their life with an experience where that sort of demeanor actually got them what they wanted. And the next time they tried it, they got what they wanted. And they found this habit of, I get what I want when I become a Karen. And if you've ever done enough personal growth work, you realize what that person is giving up by getting that short-term little gain is their dreams and goals in life. They're going to get the short-term pleasure of, I yell enough, I get my thing. But I'm not going to ever get my dreams of whatever it is that I ultimately want. The other piece to that is, and I totally lost my train of thought of where it was. But it really comes down to how somebody was raised, and they kind of get this sense of entitlement over time. They also don't think about anybody else or thinking that it can be any different. Um, and when you're only thinking about yourself in a situation and you're becoming that Karen and kind of going after somebody because you want it your way, you kind of fail to see, there's many sides to a situation, there's many views to a situation, there's many perspectives to a situation. I'll briefly touch on politics here. If you watch the right and the left, they're shouting the exact same argument at the other side, exact verbatim words about the other side. And then what they hear is like, well, turn that around and look at yourself. Well, no, turn that around and look at yourself. It's like, okay, so a lot of that, I'm gonna base the problem with politics right now on the news and how people are getting their news, because however you're getting your news is that now that's your perception, that's your position on about the situation and about the other side. So this side's got their view, this side's got their view, they're saying the same thing about the other side, and it's created this giant rift in our country. But who's right and who's wrong? The only way to really do that is to take a step back, look at the facts, and actually understand you're looking at the facts and not made up facts or made up fiction or whatever it may be. And a lot of times it's really hard to get the actual cold hard facts of the situation these days, which sucks, because if you want to be somewhere in the understanding realm to say, okay, you're right, and you're right, but you have it kind of skewed, so here's the correct thing, that's great. The other problem is nobody wants to be wrong either. And I think this also goes back to a Karen. I'd say one of our biggest problems in the world today is that nobody wants to be wrong. And if you figure out you're wrong on your own, like, oh, I shouldn't have done that, or, oh, I had the wrong information, you'll kind of like maybe beat yourself up for 5 minutes. You'll be okay with it and you'll move on. But if somebody comes up to you and says that you're wrong and here's why, they will fight you tooth and nail, probably to the end of their life, because they don't want to be wrong. And that's, I think, where a lot of the Karens come in, is like, I don't want to be wrong about this. Like, I want to be right. And now I've got to fight you tooth and nail to be right. And I remembered the other piece to that was, I don't think it's more prevalent today. I think our phones and video and social media and the news make it more prevalent. I think there's the same amount of jackasses back in the day. It's just we didn't see them all the time because we didn't have our smartphones taking video 24/7 everywhere in this entire planet. So I think we're just being exposed to it more, but they were around for a long time.
Yeah. And to dive more into your point about the whole like politics thing and the barking back and forth, one of the biggest things that I've noticed, and I think this is like above all else, just the complete hypocrisy and the irony of it all, is 4 years ago, around right about now, Democrats were sitting there saying, not my president, not my president, not my president. Republicans are saying, too bad, yes he is, you live here, president. 4 years now later, these same Republicans are now saying, not my president, bring back Trump. And it's like, right. Wait a second, you said 4 years? No, we changed our mind, we can't do that now. And it's like, okay, so you're right, it's 100%, that's exactly what's going on. It's no, we're right, and we're saying the same things, and they're just not wanting to actively listen and set expectations for each other. They're setting expectations for themselves, because it's not about what's right for the country or for each individual citizen. It's about what's doing best for your party, or what's best for your corporation, or what's best for, you as the individual, and not as a group of people that need the help the most.
Yeah. And it's weird because I explore the mind. So I look at the perspective sort of thing a lot. And I look at, let's just take immigration, for example, as a topic on politics, is, I may be in the knowledge space of this country was founded by immigrants. It makes sense based on a lot of the things that have ever been said about the US, saying, come over here. We're accepting of all. And our country was founded on immigration and immigrants. And by all means, come here, become a part of our society, become a citizen, go through the steps, et cetera, et cetera. And there are now people in this country who are like, we don't want you here, which goes against everything that the United States has ever stood for. Now, who's right and who's wrong? And the interesting thing there is the perspective. Now, if I grew up with parents who always just hated immigrants and didn't want them around, then I would have a perspective of immigrants are bad, they're evil, and I don't want them around. So the political policy of keeping them away is okay for me because that's the view. But at the alternate side, if I grew up with immigrants are fine, 99.9% of them are completely harmless. They just want a better life. And they're, I've got neighbors that are of different cultures, of different societies, whatever it may be, are immigrants. Then my perception of immigration policy that keeps them away is not okay. Because I'm like, why not? Why not? So you have these two completely different views, and both of them are okay because of how the perception is when you're raised. And how do we convince the other one which one's right if both are right? And it's a really weird dichotomy that really plays mind games with me because I like to think, because I was raised as being a human, being a nice person, and actually caring about others is the right way to be. Whereas the other people might think, caring about others is a weakness and it's a horrible thing. Who's right and who says that we're right? And, I know it feels good to me. They probably know it feels good to them. But how do we come to that middle ground? And it's just the weirdest thing to think about. It's a mind fuck. I'm not gonna lie.
No, it really is. I mean,
And
there's no two ways around it.
And that's where we are in politics. It's like, okay, yeah, we got Biden in office, but everybody that didn't want Biden now thinks it's the worst possible thing ever, whereas everybody who wanted Biden thinks it's the best possible thing ever, and vice versa with Trump. And it's like, okay, well, who's right? And we can look at science and facts and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, when it becomes a subjective question and not a factual, there's whoever's right is right about what they think and believe. It's really weird.
It is. Yeah, because you're not wrong. However, I'm of the belief that Biden is better than Trump, but at the same time, I don't think Biden's going to make that great of a change, and he should just let Kamala run the damn country because any person, I don't care, man, woman, black, white, Hispanic, whatever, any person that can stand in front of a Supreme Court justice and speak their mind to such a degree that they actually make a freaking Supreme Court justice cry is obviously a fucking amazing human being. And that's the type of person that I want running my country. That type of bitchiness, like, listen here.
Telling somebody how it is always good. So
exactly, it's like So yeah, but no, I see your point. It's just amazing to me that it's went from one extreme to the other, and it's the same people just going back and forth, and they don't see the hypocrisy of it all. It's just amazing to me. That. Or here's another example. And again, this isn't just applying to, Republicans versus Democrats. This is applying to mask wearing and the COVID-19 stuff and, what goes on in corporations, stuff like this. So I'm using this as an example, but there's a broader scope of it all. So don't think I'm sitting there doing, pointing fingers. And I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to the audience. But another example of this is this. When everything started happening and the mask wearing and so on and so forth, Republicans and Trump were all like, it's not real. Don't worry about it. You're going to be fine. It's just the flu, yada, yada, yada. And then the Republicans started, or the majority Republicans, as to say, were Trumplicans. There you go. Would say anyone who's wearing a mask is a sheep. And, you're sheep, you're sheep, you're sheep, you're sheep. Okay, well, okay, that's fine. We're sheep. But so are you, because you're doing the exact same thing that they just told you to do, and you're listening to that from that one core person, and now you're sheep too, and you're calling us sheep. No, we're not sheep, but didn't you do what they told? I don't understand. It's just again, but that again happens in everyday life and not just with that as well. And the expectations that we have surrounding that, is that whatever I hear that I believe in is automatically correct. And I don't argue that point. It's, I hear it, it must be true. Just like that, that sarcastic comment of, it's on the internet, it must be true. But a lot of people take that to a degree of realism that is just beyond any type of like actuality of like realism. It's like, how do you even begin to think that that is real? What made you think, well, I was told so, but who's your source? It's mind boggling. But, the same can be said for, logical people versus the flat earther people. It's like, and the reason why I say it like that is because they say that they're logical and but they won't even listen to the flat earther speak. They're just like, no, you're automatically wrong. I don't care about what your theories are. You're wrong. Okay, cool. That's fine. You can do that. But then the flat earthers are doing the exact same thing. And it's just like, now, again, I say logical people because the flat earth is just wrong. I'm of I'm of that type of person that's like, I don't even care what you have to think. It's horrible. I'm not even going to debate this with you because there's no logic in what you're saying. And I'm that way too. So I get that point. And it's amazing to me that we have these set of expectations, and no matter if they're not met or if we don't see other people trying to achieve those expectations for themselves, then everybody else around me is wrong and I'm the only one that's right.
Hey, I mean, you said it. It's right. It's through my filter and how I was raised and how I grew up and my thoughts and feelings that are, when the evidence says that I'm right, I'm going to latch on to it because I don't want to even contemplate being wrong on such a level that my entire world turns upside down. And oddly enough, that's a survival technique from back when we lived in tribes. If you went against the tribe mentality, you were an outcast and your chances of survival out in the wild by yourself went down to like zero. So, for millions of years, we lived in tribes where we had to like literally stick with the majority. Otherwise we were pretty much dead. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of ingrained in us that how we grew up, that's our tribe. That's the thought process that we have. The funny thing is nowadays it's so easy to just walk across the street to a new group of people. Like you can literally just jump on social media and unfriend some people and friend new people that have the same thought process as you. Like it's no longer a survival issue, oddly enough. So it's easier today to change your mind and be wrong about what you thought you knew than it is to kind of just stick with being an asshole.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say everybody who's like not willing to look at other information is an asshole. Because it's like, oh, you're trying to provide information for me to make up my own mind and become more educated so that I can see all possible aspects and then make a decision. No, screw you. It's like, okay, well, that's called education. I mean, we go to school and we learn things we didn't know before that sometimes our parents didn't teach us. And, that can change the perspective of how we were raised. Think of Waterboy. Adam Sandler goes to college and is like, my mama said, whatever. It's like, yeah, mama was wrong because she kept you at home and she didn't know any better. So, now you're learning something new. It's changing your perspective. So,
yeah. And again, that brings up another, point that happened in my life, yesterday, as a matter of fact. Being right, or being wrong. We don't want to admit when we're wrong. We don't want to admit when we're right. We want to just take all the praise when we're right, and so on and so forth. Sunday night, me and my girlfriend were having a discussion about something. I'm not going to go into it. Just I gave her some advice, and I said, hey, this is what I've seen other people do. This is what I did myself. See if you could apply this. However, then last night she comes home and she's bitching about the situation, not mentioning our conversation from Sunday. And then she came to this conclusion all on her own that she was going to take the advice that I gave her and run with it. And that's how she's going to proceed. And never mentioning once that it was my idea from the get-go. But I digress. And then after the conversation was done and she was calm and, she was done bitching, I said to her, I go, can you just do me one favor? And she goes, what's that? And I go, can you admit that I was right? And she goes, I don't even know what the fuck you're talking about, but I'm going to bed. And I was like, okay. Again, it's just funny how everything you're saying you can apply it to real life. And, when I'm at the very beginning, I'm like, okay, it makes sense of what you're saying. But then when you actually start getting into the nit and gritty and actually really thinking about it, it's like you can take any aspect of what you're talking about and just apply it to the stupidest little thing. And it really just makes it all make sense. And that's fucking intriguing.
Yeah, it's a deep thing if you really dive into it. And it's funny you mention your girlfriend in that situation, because my dad he's the type of person where you have to, put the seed out there and then let it germinate for 6 months, and then he'll come back with it being his idea.
Yeah.
And you just kind of learn over time. It's like, great, Dad, go with it. It's like, I don't ever mention like, yeah, I brought that up 6 months ago. Yeah. You dismissed it at the time. It's
See,
like,
I would be the one that say, I just told you to do that. No, you didn't. I thought of it all on my own. Oh, okay.
But see, if I do that with my dad, if I told you that 6 months ago, it's kind of like pulling the thing out of the ground and starting all over. So it's just like, great, Dad, go with it. It's I don't need the credit if it gets the results at that point. So
yeah, that's true. But no, again, I mean, in just the little bit of time that we've been talking, it's amazing that what you're, like I said, I wasn't skeptical in any which way, shape, or form. I was just curious about how you can look at it in a certain way to make it apply. And you've kind of hit a whole new aspect of things, in a way that I never thought about before. And it's really, really intriguing. I'm going to have to go pick up this book now. I've read the excerpts of it. I looked it up, and I've read a bunch of things about it, but I was like, how does it apply? And I'm like, it's got to be a reason, and it just, you make all the sense in the world with it. And it really can apply to everyday situations, even something so small. And that's brilliant, dude. It really is.
Well, and it's just like anything else. You start small, you practice, and eventually you just get to the point where most of the time you get upset. You're like, okay, you go through the little workflow, which actually, it's right there. You can get that on my website. But and it's also written out in the book, kind of walking through it. But you get to go through those like steps really, really fast. And, the more times that you can keep yourself from getting really, really upset, like you see yourself upset, you solve it really quickly, the more fun you're having in life. And if you have more fun over the span of your life, wouldn't you say that you had a good life? I think so. So yeah. Why not start with the little stuff? And then when the big stuff comes up, you're like, okay, this is just like the freaking wet towel,
Yeah.
And you can work through it.
Very, very interesting. Dude, that's freaking brilliant. I knew I was going to learn something new. I just didn't realize what I was going to be, learning here today. And you've changed some perspective on me. That I'm going to apply to everyday life. And again, like you said, start small. So I guess, and tell me if I'm wrong here. I guess at the end of the day, sometimes we need to adjust our expectations to understand that not everyone is going to set expectations, and that sometimes we might need to dig a little bit deeper. Therefore, we're both on the same page. So like, for example, when she threw down the towel yesterday and I didn't get it right away, and she didn't set an expectation of time for me, should I, me saying to her, hey, do you want me to get that done right now? Is there a reason why you want me to do it at this moment? Or, hey, when do you want me to get that done? And then kind of set that expectation for her. Hey, give me a time frame from now on, without even telling her, hey, give me a time frame from now on. Therefore, we're on that same page. Is that kind of what some of it is? I mean, obviously there's more to it, but I mean, is that a good roundabout way about over communicating?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit it on the head. And the scenario you just came up with is you're taking responsibility for the situation. a lot of times we live in the world where it's, victim mentality or responsible mentality, where it's like, what part do I play in this, and how can I adjust the situation to benefit everyone? That's the responsible way to go.
Mm-hmm.
But if you play the victim, then it's like, well, you never told me, and then blah, blah, and then it's just the batting head sort of situation. Where if you take that first step and say, hey, when do you need that done? Like, what's your expectation on this? And having that conversation, that'll solve so many problems in the future. And eventually, because you can't change anyone else, you can only change yourself. So either you'll become the master of getting other people to set expectations for you, and you setting expectations for them, that they're just going to become used to it, or they're going to catch on and say, you know what, this time I'm going to add my time frame and my why and all the other information that really helps with that communication. So absolutely, I think you hit it right on the head. So great. It's working.
It's working already. Look at that. Dude, that's pretty awesome. So guys, click the link in the description of this video or podcast, whatever you're listening or watching on, to go to his website to learn more about the book and the flow chart and where you can buy the book. It's definitely, going to expand on everything we talked about here and more. And also look at his previous book as well. Dude, again, the things I learned here today and the things we talked about really were eye-opening. In a ways, like I said, I was hoping that they would be, but I had no expectations coming in. Because I wanted, I was like looking at them like, okay, when their expectations aren't met. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and drop all my expectations and have hope that this is going to be amazing. And it really was. So, thanks for exceeding my expectations today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for letting me exceed your expectations.
No problem, man. It was absolutely fantastic. So again, thank you so much. Again, the links are in the bio of this video or podcast. Check out Ben Winter and the book. And again, thank you so much, Ben, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
As far as everybody else goes, thank you very much. Enjoy your weekend. Have a happy Friday, and we'll see you guys on Monday. But until then, stay happy, stay healthy, and as always, stay heavy. See you guys. Peace.